The Fijian Competition and Consumer Commission regulates competition, pricing and also acts as a consumer protection agency. Recently, they have charged a number of traders for abusing the Homes and Farms Care initiative. Additionally, they will also be monitoring the changes implemented as the 2018-2019 budget comes into effect. With us tonight, we have the FCCC's CEO, Joel Abraham, to shed more light on these topics, amongst others. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Geraldine and Zia.
Getting straight into it, how many traders have been charged so far?
So the investigation into the Homes Care and Farms Care initiative was undertaken post the announcement of the initiative, whereby we noted that there were some people that were raising certain issues in terms of irregularities in pricing, price information were missing. They're being told that the items would be supplied and they weren't supplied. So the FCCC, being the Consumer Protection Enforcement Agency, launched an investigation, and we said we'll do it in 3 phases. So under the first phase, we identified 43 different traders that were subjected to investigations, and out of 14, we narrowed it down to 18, and eventually we charged 11. The past week, we've just rolled out phase 3, and by next week, we'll be expecting to complete phase 3 of investigations. Now we find that there are certain traders that were identified prima facie. We looked at them and we said these are breaches, but they're able to get further information to corroborate their story, to say that what they were doing was actually not illegal. But for 11 that we single out, we are very certain that they have breached the requirements that are under the FCCC Act, and as such, we've put on to press charges against them.
What kind of charges, or rather what kind of breaches are you talking about?
Sure. So the breaches, there's quite a lot of breaches in terms of price disparity. So there were companies that were advertising for, say, if you buy on special. So at that time it was found out there was a Ramadan sale going on, and they say, if you buy this particular tile from my company, for Ramadan sale it's 90 cents, but if you take it for home care initiative, then it's $1.20. So we were not able to ascertain why there was a disparity in prices. We eventually narrowed it down to the fact that under the Homes Care and Farms Care initiative, there was a timeline given under which the funds had to be spent, which was the 31st of July back then, before the extension was granted. So these companies, they knew that people had to spend the money. There was, if they did not spend it, it was either going to go back, or government would make any other decision on how those funds would be utilized. So the consumer here had to spend the money by a certain date. So these traders were quite hard in their stance to say, look, if you want to buy from me, it's this price, you take it or leave it kind of attitude. So we said, look, this is an initiative that government has rolled out after looking at the plight of Fijians that are suffering. And I personally have gone out to the field and seen the plight of many Fijians that are suffering. You go out, you see the faces of despair, and then you will come back, no matter what your political ambitions are, what your economic views are. But when you come out from after seeing these people, you will have a sense of realization and appreciation that these people need this kind of support. Because for some people you're talking about, they've got nothing. I personally went down, talked to an elderly gentleman. He was sitting there looking at the road. I said, Tamana, what happened? He said, I just don't know what to do. I don't know where to begin. I'm 60 plus years old. I don't know what to do. And so when they got this initiative, there are quite a lot of Fijians that came out and they said, this is so good. There's somebody helping us. But at the same time, whenever such initiatives are rolled out, there'll always be consumers who are going to try and abuse it, and there are going to be businesses that are trying to profiteer from it. And the FCCC exists to ensure that we look at these people that come in to just try and make a quick buck out of this whole thing.
Well, looking at traders, you've been able to charge them. What about consumers? Like you mentioned, there would be some who would be trying to fool the system.
Yes. So what we are doing is we're working with the Ministry of Economy to try and go down and actually undertake verification now. For people who have been honest with the system, it's quite easy to verify because they've been honest. People who've been dishonest, they've gone to the extent of trying to get cards made from the elections office, and I think the supervisor of election had mentioned this as well, that people are trying to abuse the system by saying, I've changed my address. So we are going to certain places and trying to locate people, and it's quite hard to locate them because the address that they've given is really not the address that they're staying on. And there's some genuine cases where people who are staying at a particular address and they've had their whole house destroyed, they've moved elsewhere. So it takes a bit of time to do these check and balances. We've got a huge team working on this, and we're continually looking at verification, and we want to give people the benefit of the doubt to say, you come back and you prove that you have not breached. So it's taking some time, and yes, we've got a few consumers that we've got circled in. And when we're able to complete investigation and we have enough evidence that we are pleased that we can take the matter to court, definitely we'll do that.
So what's the prosecution power like for the FCCC? How far does it go in terms of the charge?
Well, the FCCC has the powers in terms of enforcement. We've got quite a lot of powers which are very strong. In the 2017-18 national budget, which was the past budget, the Minister of Economy had announced changes in the FCCC Act. What that meant is fines that used to be 3,000 went up to 50,000. Those ones that used to be up to 5,000 went up to 250,000. Imprisonment sentences that used to be for 12 months to 3 years went up to 10 years. So the penalties do exist, and previously the penalties were restricted to issues pertaining to price regulations only. These were extended to consumer protection issues as well. So that gives us quite a broad powers, to actually go out and look at putting out penalties to people who are infringing. But I always say with power comes responsibility. As such, at FCCC we must ensure that we have ticked all the boxes, we've crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's before we say, look, the penalty should be applied. Because you could be talking about a small business that operates somewhere in Rekereki, a hardware store, you give him a 50,000 penalty, and the next thing you know, he's winding down. But the penalty is there as a deterrent, and people are now becoming quite aware of the deterrents that exist. And the courts are also taking a very hard stance. You've seen recently companies fined $20,000, $15,000 for offences under the FCCC Act. People have also been put in remand in the Western Division for violations under the FCCC Act. So we've already seen people that are being taken to task. The courts as well as the FCCC is taking this very seriously.
So I understand that the legislation of the FCCC is under review, right?
Yes.
We'd like to talk more about that. Yeah.
We'll be back with more after the break. Welcome back. Now, Mr. Abraham, Ziad had mentioned FCCC's legislation on being reviewed. What clauses? Is it the entire act itself?
Yes, there's a provision in the act that says that after so many years you need to review the act, because you have to realize that the FCCC Act encompasses regulations or legislations that look at the entire business community. And the business dynamics continue to change. The market is evolving. So previously you used to have brick and mortar type of business arrangements where you actually had to walk into a shop to acquire goods or services. Now it's all, there's a virtual marketplace. You don't need to get out of the comfort of your house. You could just sit in and order goods, and the next thing you know, somebody is there at your doorstep knocking to deliver what you've ordered for. Because that the evolution in the marketplace is taking place, we need to, as the regulator responsible for consumer protection as well as competition, we need to respond by ensuring that the legislations continually being changed to ensure that we are able to look at some of these things. And we found previously, I think the pink window and Desi fashion cases were the noticeable ones that Fijians can relate to. It's about a boutique set up on Facebook, and you had to buy things, and they took funds, wasn't delivered. So eventually people turned up to the FCCC, lodged complaints. We managed to get more than $55,000 worth of things refunded to various consumers. Then they went and opened another company called Desi Fashions, for which we've got more than 20 cases in court. So we need to continually realign ourselves to modern business practices. So that is one thing that we're looking at, is looking at modernizing the act. The other things that that we're including is looking at more alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. because you know that our court systems, the FCCC, when we charge somebody, it counts as a criminal conviction. So we go to the same courts that you would go for a murder case or rape case or theft. And usually in the interest of justice, they prioritize cases which have more public interest. So when we take consumer protection cases, there are instances where our cases will be called at a later date, or we get mentions. And because that happens, the whole redress to a consumer gets delayed. So back in 2010, the FCCC, back then we used to be called the Commerce Commission, we had said we're looking at mediation as a form of dispute resolution. And with the establishment of the Fiji Mediation Center, we are now in discussions to sign a memorandum of understanding with them to see how best we can use them to refer cases to resolve through mediation. Now, apart from that, we've got major cases like competition cases or bigger consumer protection cases. One of the ones that FCCC is currently looking at is this white goods company. They got an iron from overseas that was imported, a renowned brand. They're giving a 1-year warranty on the iron. But the manufacturer's warranty covered for the iron was 2 years. So consumers taking it, they started posing question, if the manufacturer is saying that this item can be covered for warranty for 2 years, why am I just being given 1 year? So one consumer raised it with us, but we noted that there's so many thousands of pieces that had come in, so it's a consumer-wide issue. It's a greater issue that we need to look at. So we've got this thing that was changed, looking at enforceable undertaking. So you really don't need to go to court to get this enforced. You can sign an agreement, and the agreement becomes an undertaking that the company makes to the FCCC to say, look, this is how we're going to resolve this complaint, and this is how we're going to give redress to consumers. In the event they default, we just take the agreement, get it enforced by the courts. So,
well, looking at legislations being reviewed, there's also chances of new clauses being added as well. I know for a fact that currently you have a rent freeze that is in place, and so far the rent freeze has been renewed on a yearly basis. And previously you've stated that there's chances of legislation being put in place. However, it's been happening for quite a number of years now. When can we expect some movement on that?
Yes, this rental legislation, the rental market is not an easy market to deal with to start with. You've got tenants and you've got the landlord. Currently you've got legislation such as the Fair Rents Act that talks about what should be the fair rental amount. You've got the Distress of Rents Act that says if somebody doesn't pay their rent, how do you actually take action to recover your rent. Then you've got the Public Health Act that is somewhere with the Ministry of Health. And there's several other legislation that actually deal with this. There's few sections in the property law, there's few sections in the FCCC Act. So currently laws are all fragmented. So if anybody wants to get a solution to their problems, they go to various different agencies. So we're trying to ensure that there's a one-stop shop to these kind of things. The idea is to improve access to justice. People are able to get justice, and not only tenants but landlords as well. I face complaints from so many landlords that say, you know, this tenant has come in and destroyed my property, and what do I do from here? So equal protection needs to be given to that landlord as well as the tenant. The FCCC is all about advocating a very fair and balanced legislation. And because we are advocating for that, it has to be benchmarked to certain legislation that currently exists. We're looking at the Australian, the New Zealand laws, we're looking at, but it's not a matter of copy-paste. You can't get legislation from Australia and put it in Fiji.
So all in all, we can expect this to continue for a little while longer?
Yes, because we need to ensure that the legislation fits and solves the problem that Fijians face on a day-to-day basis. It's not just about making legislation to look pretty, you know, it's something that needs to help people.
The last update we received was from the previous CEO of the Consumer Council. Ms. Primala Kumar said that they were currently undergoing consultations, and that was in collaboration with the FCCC. So how far along is that process?
Well, the consultation has been an ongoing thing. I'm quite disappointed. The response to the consultation has not been that much. You talk about the Suvarnasori corridor, where you find that most properties are rented out in Fiji. We've had only about 8 people in total turn up to consultation. So you've had instances where we've sat out for 3 hours and nobody's turned up.
But why do you think that's happening? There's so many complaints you hear by word of mouth, even on social media, where you have tenants and also
both tenants and landlords
who do complain about it.
So after some time, I was looking at it, and what I think, this is my personal opinion, I think there's a high degree of collusion between landlords and tenants. You look at the rent freeze for this matter. There's 4 of us will go and say, look, I won't pay this because this is a higher rental. The 5th person will come and say, look, I'll pay you whatever you want. We've had instances where officers have gone for inspections, 500 shown on the receipt, 500 shown on the agreement, the tenant says 500, the landlord says 500. 2 months down the line, they have some sort of argument about between their wives. I've got the tenant coming to me, say, look, it was 700, I was paying him 200 on the side.
I see.
So because of that degree of collusion, people are not coming forward and helping us do a robust legislation to be able to, so we can help them in the future. And that's concerning because people are not coming forward. They only come forward to us and they say, look, I was paying a higher rent. We say, why? Did you not know about the rent freeze? No, I knew about it, but I put it as a savings account. So I was paying him extra rental.
Well, on that note, Ziad, you're also renting out. You're a tenant.
I mean, for me, it's an issue of security. Like, for example, if I know that if I complain against my landlord, I'll just get kicked out. So what measures are in place to protect me as a tenant?
Before we get to that answer, I think there's a whole lot more that can be explored in this particular topic. We'll be back with more after the break. Welcome back. Now, Ziad, we were talking about rental freeze and how we're both tenants. I also happen to be a landlord for a particular property. And you had some concerns.
Right. So what measures are in place with the FCCC or the Consumer Council to protect tenants who complain against their landlords?
Sure. I mean, there's a whistleblower policy that is there. You just need to suspect that a breach is happening. And what we do is we don't per se go and, so if we get a complaint for a particular area, if our resources, our vehicles are going to the particular area, we'll not only go to one household, we'll go to all the households on the street. So when we go to all the households on the street, nobody can single you out to say, look, you went and complained and this is, and they've come as a result specifically to my property. Because we cover all the houses. It gives us 2 things. It allows us, 1, to ensure that the person who's complained does not get victimized. 2, it also allows us, if you're going to an area, it's about maximizing the use of resources that government has bestowed on us. So we want to also ensure that when we go to a particular area, we are actually covering a larger number of
There's
landlords.
a couple of things that I wanted to clarify while you're still here. Now, recently I've moved house from where I was renting before to a new place, and it just so happened that I've noticed there's a lot of people out there who are both tenants and who are landlords. They don't have written agreements, no tenancy agreements that's in place. Sometimes due to desperation, they do have to move into a house and they're told that they will be getting a rental agreement or a tenancy agreement later on. They don't get it. Is that criminal?
Well, not keeping an agreement, not issuing receipts and increasing the rental is a direct breach of the FCCC Act, for which we can take matters to court, we can give spot fines. There's quite a lot of things that we can do in terms of enforcing that, but to cut it short, yes, it is illegal. But this is something I say to people, when you start accepting something, it becomes a norm. So even if people do come to me and say, look, we were desperate to move in, so we just moved in and we said we'll get a receipt and we'll get a receipt later, we'll do an agreement later. I say, look, this comes back to haunt you when you have issues when you move into a property, because there's certain things that you need to do. 1, you need to go with the landlord and sign a condition report to say what was the condition of the house that you what was the condition of the house when you moved in. Because when you're moving out, the landlord in most cases don't refund the bond because they say you've damaged the house. That condition report is going to help you. So have 2 copies, give 1 to the landlord and keep 1, so that you have enough evidence.
Right. Looking at the conditions of actually moving into a place, I think there's a template or some sort of an understanding that has been given out by FIRCUS to the FCCC about basic tenancy rules. And most people don't know about this because, like you've mentioned, most will not go and get a proper tenancy agreement. What are the basic rules that tenants and landlords must adhere to? Is there any instances in when they can stop the number of people that are living in that particular house or some other factors?
What does a standard agreement look like?
So we've got a copy of the standard agreement on our website, so anybody can access it. I mean, apart from that, in terms of terms and conditions, what the FCCC is concerned is with unfair terms and conditions now. The landlords here in Fiji must realize one thing, that when you're giving your property out on rent, you're actually being paid rental for somebody to occupy that premises. Now, of course, the Act says you can take certain steps or put in certain clause to protect your legitimate interest. Now, there are instances where people will say, look, this is a 2-bedroom house, and for health issues, you can't have 30 people living in that house. This is a legitimate concern.
Yes.
But then we've got people that that say, look, you must be of a particular ethnicity to be living in that house. There is no protection of any legitimate interest. What we are saying is, a landlord is concerned about having a good tenant. So you could to ensure that the tenant pays your rent on time, doesn't damage your property, etc., etc., a few things. But to single somebody out on and putting unfair terms and conditions such as ethnicity. In Fiji, the other thing that you find in Suva is people will ask, where are you from? You're from Lambasa? If you are, sorry, we won't give you this property.
Well, I have a workmate of mine who's telling me he's had instances in the past where he has been asked to drop in his CV even and his payslip with landlords.
Well, landlords can actually do a thorough background check before they can give their premises to somebody, and it's between the landlords and the tenants to see what is adequate information that they want to get, because I mean at some point in time the landlords must also safeguard their interest because they're giving their property.
On that note, you're also asking landlords to actually register with the FCCC.
Yes. So the requirement for registering with FCCC is, once if there's a complaint in regards to the property, we already have the document, so it will help us serve both the landlords and the tenants better. You don't have to go and find out all this information and get it out, because by the time we get this information out, they say, oh, the agreement isn't there, or this isn't there, that isn't there. When the landlords come and register, we'll give them all the requirements. So even if you don't have agreements in there, we'll say, look, we're giving you time to go and fix this up, get agreement and come and register with us. And that's been there for quite some time, but we're just not having the turnout. People are not coming to register.
So the problems associated with the rent freeze since 2007, it goes both ways. So some honest landlords have also been suffering because they're not getting the market value for their property.
Sure.
So how do you intend to resolve that for them? So
for the landlords, the Act allows that you can make an application to the minister, right? So there are people that will say, I have done maintenance on my property, as such I should be given fair chance to look at increasing my rent. But there are some people who will just take one can of paint and paint the house and say repair maintenance done, 500 more on the rent. So the whole idea is to try and take these people out of the equation, you know, because if you open it up, it's susceptible to abuse. That is why there's a rigorous process in there, and if you have done and you can prove that you have done it, of course then condition reports you need to get, there's a whole lot of documents that you need to provide. But there is no restriction on new buildings, so people who are getting new buildings done, first rental is left to the market, so you can fix the first rent. So it has some issues as far as the landlords are concerned. There are some who are doing very minor repair and maintenance, but there are some people who are just trying to use this maintenance as a way of kicking somebody out. They'll say, look, can you move out, I want to do maintenance on the property, and they find somebody else and
that happens a lot. That happens a lot.
Yes.
Well, speaking of the rental agencies and of course the real estate agents that are out there, FCCC just signed an MOU with the Real Estate's Licensing Board to strengthen the monitoring of agents. I'd like to know how that's coming along, but we'll be back with more after the break. Welcome back. Mr. Abraham had mentioned the FCCC signing an MOU with the Real Estate Licensing Board to strengthen monitoring of agents. How's that coming along?
So we just signed an MOU with the Real Estate Licensing Board. Now, the reason for that is, as we were speaking in the previous segment talking about the rental market. Now, there's the real estate agents, they also participate as far as renting out properties are concerned. And there are certain instances where we've received some complaints from members of the public that there's some of these agents that are actually engaging in misrepresentation. They know that people don't have the same information. So if three of us were going to get a property, they'll say, look, he's offered 500. What would you like to offer? So because you want the property, you'll say, okay, I can do 550, and they'll come to me and say,
it seems almost like an auction.
Yeah, she's offered 600. How much? I'll say, okay, maybe I can do 620, you know. So eventually he's not offered 500, he just agreed for the 400 rent that that was there on the property anyway.
Right.
So they're doing two things. One, they're misrepresenting, and two, they're legally helping business landlords increase rent, which is, it's not nice, And yes, when we do enforcement, the landlord gets charged because in many instances in Fiji, the agent is not really acting on behalf of the landlord. After they just find the rental for you, they take the first month's rent, and then they're gone. So the landlord gets all the penalties that come as a result of illegally increasing the rent. So by partnering with the real estate licensing board, we are really looking at whether being an ethical operator should be part of the licensing conditions as well.
Right.
So,
well, looking at the initiatives that have been set forth in the 2018-2019 budget, especially helping those who are going to be first land and first home buyers, money being set aside, or grants being given rather, to those who are middle and low income earners. Now, of course, the name itself suggests those who are not able to pay exorbitant amounts of money to start off their homes. However, I did a little bit of research, and it just so happened that I got in touch with one of the real estate agencies, and they were selling off this piece of property. Now, this particular piece of land was not landscaped. It was on a slope. And it was going for $180,000. Now, if I were to buy that, and I'm a low middle income earner, and then I would buy the property for that much, then I would have to build something on it, get landscaping done, take a loan out on all of that. All in all, it would cost upwards of what, $250,000, $300,000? And on a 30-year payment plan, I would pay about $1,200, $1,500. What is the FCCC going to do to try and monitor that?
Yeah, that is why we've signed the MOU with the real estate licensing board. There's a few things that we've got that we don't, that we want to keep to ourselves. Have the element of surprise on our side.
Not on for the record.
Would you like to break something for the first time here?
Yeah.
What we'd like to do is basically look at some of the conduct that the agents are doing as to how we'll do it. If we tell them how we're going to do it, they become more aware of it. But we've got people that have already volunteered to assist the FCCC to carry out some of this behind the scenes investigation. And we find that you're talking about 180,000 for a piece of land. It's not just about 180,000. There's certain degree of collusion between valuers and the agents. So you go, they give you a valuation report, and the valuation report is suited to say what the agent is after, and of course the more they can get, the more commission they get. So that is something that we will be doing, but at this point in time, no comments.
So we won't dig into that. Let's talk about some other budget measures that were recently introduced. The ECAL, 10 cent to 20 cent. So when it was first implemented, of course there were some problems. Some retailers were abusing the system. This time around, when it has changed to 20 cents, what is the FCCC doing to increase in its monitoring potential?
Yeah, a lot of people after the introduction of 10 cents, because it has just come out, the people trying to sell plastic bags for 15 cents, 20 cents. Then they were trying to, people that were not part of the phase 1 implementation were also trying to sell the bag. And what people like to do in Fiji, especially some traders, what they do is they say to consumers, look, it's the government's thing, I can't do anything. Just so I can add some more for my profit.
To clarify, this would apply for those who have a POS. Those who don't, they cannot charge it.
Yes. That is the phase 1 of implementation that was done by the Fiji Revenue and Customs Services, so supermarkets that have a point of sale system. So if you're going to a corner store somewhere in Rewanga and they don't have a point of sale system, it doesn't apply to them. So they should not be charging you 10 cents for but what I say is, we'll need to look at this from both sides. Yes, we don't want people abusing the 10 cents to 20 cents increment. We don't want people to be charging more than what is stipulated under the law. But from the other side, we also don't want people to use plastic bags. Now, people must realize that there comes a time when as people of this nation, we must take a stand to say, look, we are polluting our environment. Where do these plastic bags end up to? People in Fiji, they like to take all these shopping bags, tie your rubbish in and throw it. And eventually it goes to the landfill or it goes to the dump, and it takes so many years for the plastic to get back into nature. And it has a lot of impact. You've got turtles ingesting plastic. You've got so the problem is quite widespread, and that's a whole policy idea. So yes, the FCCC is there to ensure that people don't abuse the system by saying, look, this is government's initiative, but at the same time we also call on people to exercise good sense and try and move out of using plastic bags.
Looking at something more substantial, the Parenthood Assistance Scheme that has been put in place by the government, will the FCCC be keeping an eye on that as well?
Well, the parenthood thing is been done by government to ensure that the first time mothers, they are able to get access into to buying certain things for their children. Now, while we will not directly monitor how parents use the funds, we are concerned about the other side. Now there are so many traders that know that this money now exists for new mothers to buy things. So we don't want companies to start increasing the price on baby powder, baby wipes. In fact, we've been post the last budget, we've been talking to certain traders, and you would find that Johnson & Johnson's baby wipes that used to be the 80s used to cost $10.50 something. It's now come down to $7 something, and that is because of the dialogue the FCCC is having with traders behind the scenes. You're looking at baby shampoos, baby wipes, baby powder, products that will assist babies when they're born. So that people don't abuse this, and because these things are not price controlled or regulated, it's susceptible to abuse. You've got the wholesaler, which is Healthcare International, is providing all these discounts to the retailers, but then the retailers are putting extra markups to try and get more profits into it. So that is something we've been monitoring behind the scenes to ensure that people, when they get this assistance is being used well, they get value for money.
Right, so that's something that cannot be regulated, like you said, but something that can be regulated is, of course, the price of motor spirits and LPG gases. More on that coming up after this break. Welcome back. Now, Mr. Abraham, we're talking about the LPG gases and also motor spirits, the price increase. Now, of course, there may be people out there who are wondering, why is it always so expensive? Why isn't the FCCC or anyone doing anything to lower prices?
If you look at Fiji as a market, we don't really manufacture much. Right? Even the things that we manufacture, all raw materials are purchased overseas. The people, when the prices of butter was increasing, people said, oh, Fiji dairy is trying to profiteer from it. People have to realize we buy butter in slabs and we get it, churn it, and then package it as raw butter and sell it. For fuel, unless we file oil in Fiji, then that's another story. But we are price takers. We rely on the global movements in fuel prices, and what we do is we try and ensure that we give enough time to Fijian consumers to be able to adjust. So if you're looking at the price cycles, you'll know when it's going to go up, when it's going to come down, because you can always follow the trend as to how it's going internationally. Now, there was a time when the crude oil prices were low. It used to be $20 a barrel, sitting at somewhere about $50 to $60 now. There was a time when it was at $140 a barrel. So we rely on crude oil prices that is traded internationally. Fiji has really got no say in that. And what we do is, because we don't control the prices internationally, we are only able to go to the oil companies operating in Fiji and say, look, you need to restrict your margin so that the price does not spiral out of control. Now, in a nutshell, I'd say the situation could be worse if the FCCC didn't exist. Prices could be really dependent on how much the oil companies would charge you.
But these prices are coming up for review soon, correct?
Yes, they'll be under review. So the next price change would be somewhere in October, and we'd be looking at what are the movements in the international price, in the freight rates, the changes in exchange rates. So, I mean, these things ultimately go towards contributing to the cost of living, but people need to realize we don't make things in Fiji, and until and unless we become self-sufficient, we're always going to be reliant. So this year is especially difficult for the FCCC because you've got so many political parties, because it's an election year. People are talking about cost. Everybody's talking about cost of living left, right and center. People must realize the reality of Fiji. there's certain things that we don't have any control over. No matter which government comes into power, you can't do anything about it because it's all it all moves internationally. So it's ludicrous for people to say, we'll come into power or we'll do this and we'll reduce the price by 20%, 50%. You really can't do that because we are reliant on how commodities trade internationally.
So let's just go back quickly to something that is affected by the budget. We were talking about this off camera, and this is something that a lot of members of the public always complain about. The prices of cigarettes and alcohol. And especially the inconsistencies that you see in the prices depending on where you buy it from. Why do you think that is?
Well, one, it's not regulated. So
why not?
So the retail, because the objective of government really, if you look at the increases in duty, is to say we want to discourage consumption. Now, anybody will tell you cigarettes and alcohol is not good for health. It does a number on your kidneys and your lungs. And in fact, the cigarette packets say, don't smoke because you'll get cancer. But I find people go into the shops and say, can you give me the BH for cancer? Or give me heart disease. People take it as a joke. You go and you ask for, you say, give me heart disease. And they give you that packet and people will say, oh, the taste is different. But the whole idea is to discourage consumption. So,
of course, this goes in line with government's priorities to try to reduce the number of NCDs.
Exactly.
On the other hand, they've also increased I think the taxes on carbonated drinks, sugary drinks. So one may say that if they can regulate that, then why not this?
So really it's not regulated because a carbonated drink also is not subject to control. You go buy it at a corner, you buy Coke even in a corner shop somewhere. The price may be different, or you buy Sprint or whatever carbonated drinks exist. You'll find the price in the supermarket will always be lower than the prices there because it is quite easier for these wholesalers. So Coke as a manufacturer, it's always easier to go to MHs as a supermarket and say, look, I want you to sell it at this price. No hard and fast about it, but I'll give you a rebate if you sell it at this price. But it's harder to do it at a mom and dad store somewhere, say in Cunningham. So you'll always find there will be disparity in price. But as far as alcohol and cigarettes are concerned, people or shop owners, they do realize that if I'm selling this, one, it's a very high value item, so they pay quite a lot because they store it and they keep it, and then you have to have a lot of security around it. It's easy to steal a packet of cigarette. So because it has a higher cost for different businesses, their cost structure is different. As such, the pricing structure is different.
Very quickly, of course, looking at pricing structures, changes that have come into effect into different supermarkets and all. I myself noticed this where the prices had changed, but the price, I'm not sure what the correct word is.
The markup,
the
what
markup
you see,
was
the label.
not changed. Yes, thank you for that. The markup had
and
not
I mean,
changed.
for a consumer, you pick up an item and you take it to the counter, and then you find out that the price is actually more. It's embarrassing if you go and put it back.
Exactly, and you would note that in the last year, there's 2 judgments against 2 supermarkets, 20,000 fine each for that particular offense, where it's called price disadvantage. What they do is they take the counter price and they take the shelf price, and you see there's a disparity. So when we go and investigate the things like forgot to update the system, we forgot to change the label, you say, hang on, but that's not the consumer's problem. And you will find that more and more stores that are coming up, we are encouraging them to put these price checker things. You'll find in MH stores, you'll have all these price checkers, so you can scan it and you will find out. But we find that consumers are very reliant on the prices. So one of the requirements under the FCCC Act is for price marking and display to be there. And our officers, when they go to these shops, that is one of the things that they check. Now, it's happened to me as well. I went and I purchased something and the price was different. When I asked the manager took out $1 from the till and said, here's your $1 back. I said, hang on, I'm not interested in the $1. So then I came in and lodged a complaint at my office. And
you lodged a complaint in your own office?
Yeah, because it had happened to me.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's a governance thing, you don't want to use your position, to disadvantage anybody. The process has to be fair and transparent to everybody.
Yeah.
So my officers went and investigated, they looked out, took out the list, the sales on that particular day, and they found that there's so many people that were
Well, on that note, I'm sorry to say that we have run out of time.
Yep,
if there happen to be anyone else out there who do happen to have issues that they'd like to raise, you remember that you can raise any concerns regarding the issues that have been discussed tonight in the program with the FCCC by calling 892-1991, or you can send an email to complaints@fccc.gov.fj. We hope that you enjoyed the show tonight, and up next, Nimalin Delayan Batiki joins you with My Say. Until next time, have a pleasant evening.
Good evening. I'm Nemani Ndelembatiki of the Fiji Sun. Welcome to Fiji's first TV editorial show. In my say tonight, I will talk about new government initiatives to help the families. If you want to know whether a government initiative is good, ask the people that it impacts. I'm talking directly to the politicians here. Stop being armchair critics, go out and speak to the people and obtain first-hand information before you address an issue. In other words, get your facts right. When you get the facts or truth, tell it as it is. Do not manipulate it or distort it to suit your own political agenda. You can analyze it and interpret it. Smart politicians will recognize the positive features and highlight what can be done to get a better result or outcome. That's the modus operandi of a responsible politician. In the general election, voters will be looking at what we as a nation can do better. People are not interested in the mudslinging and the smear campaigns. They are interested in comprehensive policy package that will lift the standard of living, create new jobs, introduce more education opportunities for higher learning, build and maintain an affordable and accessible health service, look after the poor, disabled, the weak and the vulnerable of our society, and strengthen security for all people. At the moment, initiatives rolled out by the Fiji First government seem unbeatable. The challenge is for the opposition political parties to come up with something better and sustainable in the long run. The Fiji First government has proved in the last 4 years that its initiatives are sustainable. Initiatives like the free school fees, the free school bus fares, the free milk and Weet-Bix for Year 1 students, the free medicine, water and electricity subsidy for those in the lower socio-economic ladder, bus fare subsidy for those over 65 years, and a host of social welfare benefits for the elderly, the poor, the disabled, and the vulnerable. This government has been able to maintain this on the back of 9 consecutive years of economic growth. That's pretty impressive when you consider the massive spending of millions of dollars in infrastructure development and the devastating impact of Tropical Cyclone Winston in 2016. If you had read in the Fiji Sun, listened on radio, and seen on television Prime Minister Voreqe Bainimarama's address at the opening of the Ra Provincial Council meeting and Dandamu Nanukuloa, you should be able to work out the government's focus. It was well laid out by Mr. Bainimarama. His emphasis on the importance of the family is profound. Therein lies the solution to our social problems and the economic implications. We must strengthen the institution of the family. It's our frontline defense against the wiles of the adversary, which has brought pain and suffering to many families. It requires reinforcing our spiritual and cultural values that have stood the test of time. The gradual erosion of these values has led to an increase in social problems. The abuse of alcohol, the use of dangerous and illicit drugs, sexual promiscuity, crimes, dishonesty, and other forms of antisocial behavior have threatened and in several cases destroyed families. When he was in Levuka this week, Mr. Bainimarama heard that residents in some parts of Levuka lived in fear because of drunkenness and lawlessness. He correctly attributes it to, and I quote, a lack of values, a lack of common decency, accountability and responsibility for one's own behavior and for the safety of others, close quote. This can be traced back to the family where everything begins. If a family raises and teaches its children correct principles, values and standards, the children are most likely to grow up with them. We also know that financial pressures sometimes lead to bitter family feuds and eventual breakups. That's why we should all welcome the government's latest family initiative called Parenthood Assistance Payment Scheme. It's unprecedented and offers relief to parents facing financial hardships. Torika Tinai of Naluai Naitasiri, a beneficiary, could not hide her joy after she gave birth to a fifth child at the CWM hospital in Suba on Wednesday, the day the scheme came to effect. She will receive $500 after she registers her baby to pay for the baby needs. The stay-home mom will receive another $500 when her daughter attends year 1. Working moms will have their maternity leave increased from 84 days to 98 days. For the first time, working dads like Ms. Tinai's husband will get 5 days paternity leave. These are all family-oriented measures that will help families. The family focus will help reset the moral compass of this nation. Then we can effectively resolve our social problems. Mr. Bainimarama is a strong family man. It's reflected in the policies that are now being introduced. His passion for families and children shows in how he interacts with people, particularly children. A world church leader once said, and I quote, "The greatest work you can ever do is within the 4 walls of your home. No success in life can compensate for failure in the home," close quote. That's food for thought for everyone. I am Neman Indalembatiki of the Fiji Sun. That was my say tonight. For more of my views, you can read the Fiji Sun. If you wish to share your thoughts on any of the issues I've raised, please email me on nemani.delembatiki@fijisun.com.fk. See you next week.